Okay, so now we start with Neo-Keynesian model. It is also known as ISLM model. It is majorly given by J.R. Hicks. Let's start with the assumptions. So, first of all, there is no labor market. We only have money, bonds, and goods market in it. Price rigidity. So, there is P is equals to P dash. Then we have consumption function, which is based on Keynesian psychological law. I is equals to I bar minus BI, which means investment is inversely proportional to interest rates, and B is the interest sensitivity to investment demand here. Money market behavior is based on Keynesian liquidity preference. Money supply is exogenous, which means that it is determined by the central bank. And let's go to the derivation of IS curve. So in goods market, investment is equals to savings, and here is the so in the first panel we can see that there are two different interest rates in it, I1 and I2. So when I1 and I2 gives us E1 and E2 with output Y1 and Y2, we get a downward sloping IS curve with increase in interest rates leads to fall in aggregate demand, which leads to fall in output. So, yeah, this is the equation which majorly pans out throughout the IS curve model. Now, deriving the IS curve algebraically, so we have y is equals to AD, y is equals to autonomous investment minus BI plus C into 1 minus TY, which we did earlier. And then we have further deriving it. So we will get y is equals to 1 upon 1 minus C, 1 minus T, and autonomous variable minus BI. We can write this as alpha G or government multiplier. So then we have this equation, and further deducing it, we will get autonomous multiplied upon B minus Y upon alpha GB. This is the equation of IS curve. Slope of IS curve is minus 1 upon alpha GB. And now IS curve can be derived by goods market equilibrium, presenting it with I as function of Y. And so, yeah, initial equilibrium in goods market takes place at E1, and where AD1 intersects Y is equals to AD line, equilibrium output is Y1 when interest rate in the market is I1. It provides a combination of Y1 and I1 in the second panel to represent one point on IS curve. The If interest rate falls from I1 to I2, then investment demand rises and shift AD curve upwards at initial equilibrium E1. There is excess demand with upward shift of AD. This results in increasing output. There is upward movement on AD2 and y is equals to AD line, which results in the new equilibrium at point E2. The fall in interest rate increased investment demand, which increased AD and therefore increased the output. This gives another combination Y2 I2, which can be plotted in the second panel. All these combinations like Y1 I1 and Y2 I2 can be joined to provide IS curve. Slope of IS curve is minus 1 upon alpha GB. The negative sign is due to the inverse relation between interest rate and output for creating goods market equilibrium. Larger alpha G leads to flatter IS curve. where interest rate falls and rise in investment demand increase AD, then output decreases at the rate of alpha G. Therefore, larger alpha G implies larger change in output for a given change in interest rate. Higher MPC or lower proportional tax rate can lead to higher alpha G and flatter IS as well. So higher MPC or lower proportional tax can lead to flatter IS curve and higher AG. If interest sensitivity of investment demand, which is B, is high, then a given fall in interest rate will increase investment demand by a larger value, and this will lead to higher increase in aggregate demand and therefore higher increase in equilibrium output. So there are some points above and below the IS curve. So all points above IS curve in this region so represents excess supply. So this is the region of excess supply, and all points below IS curve represents excess demand for goods. So this region, excess demand. Points above IS represent excess supply of goods because interest rate is higher at any given level of output compared to the what is needed for equilibrium at that level of output. For example, at output level Y1, interest rate needed for good market equilibrium is I1. If output remains at Y1 and interest rate rises, then AD falls and economy changes from Y is equals to AD or the IS curve to Y greater than AD. If interest rate is reduced at same level of output, Y1, then AD will rise above what is needed for equilibrium and therefore all points below the IS curve represent excess demand for goods. This is because interest rate is lesser than what is needed to achieve equilibrium at any level of output. Now let's go to the shift of IS curve. Yeah. So IS curve shifts upward to the right if autonomous variable increases and it shifts downward to the left if autonomous variable decreases. So increase in leads to rightward shift in IS curve. So again, drawing a rough figure for it. Rest variables will be the same. And going on the second panel, this is IS1 and this is IS2. They should be the same line with interest, same interest. And this is point E1, this is point E2. This is alpha G and the change in autonomous variable. Yeah. So this is how we can see the rightward shift in IS curve. Alpha G delta BI is equals to 0 in horizontal shift of IS curve because IS is constant. So since I is constant in horizontal shift in IS. So now we move on to LM curve, which represents all possible combinations of Y and I such that the money market and financial market is in equilibrium. According to neo-Keynesian assumptions, wealth can be held either in terms of money or in terms of bonds. Therefore, real demand for money, L, and real demand for bonds should always be equal to real wealth in the economy. So let's move to LM curve. L plus DB should equal to wealth bond price. So this is equation 1. These are all according to the neo-Keynesian assumptions. L is the real demand for money. DB is demand for bonds. And wealth is the whole aggregate economy's wealth. Therefore, neo-Keynesian suggested that real supply of money and real supply of bonds should be arranged by the monetary authority in such a way that they are added up to real wealth. So that will be so M bar upon P bar is the real money supply. This is equation 2. This is real money supply. This is supply of bonds, which adds up to real wealth. So then we, from equation 1 and 2, this is equation 3. If L is greater than M bar upon P bar, which is greater than money supply, it implies excess demand for money, which means then DB is less than SB. That means excess supply of bonds. For satisfying the equation third, then this is the first implication. Second is, if L is smaller than M bar upon P bar, the inverse will happen, wherein there is excess supply for money and DB is greater than SB. For that means excess demand for bonds. For satisfying this equation, Neo-Keynesian model considered Keynesian liquidity preference as method for determination of money demand. According to Keynesian liquidity preference theory, money is demanded for three reasons. First is transaction demand for money. When money is demanded with the objective of sales and purchase of goods and services, it is directly related to output. First is transaction. Second is precautionary demand. For money, it is demand for money to meet unforeseen situation. It is directly related to output. Third is speculative demand for money. When money is demanded for waiting for bond price to fall and interest rate to rise in the market, then it is called speculative demand for money. Bonds are financial papers which can be issued by central government, provincial government, municipal corporations, or any other institution in financial markets to borrow or raise from the market. Bonds are considered to be safest asset because any default on bond implies immediate bankruptcy. Bonds have a fixed period of maturity except perpetuities or consols, after which the bondholders receive return on bonds. Bonds are normally tradable except in case of bonds which are held to maturity bonds, HTM bonds. The initial price at which bond is issued in the primary financial market, its price is called face value of the bond. The maturity value of bond is the amount that is promised by the bond issuer to be paid at the time of maturity of the bond. The difference between maturity value and face value is the coupon value. The coupon value remains fixed in case of any bond. So when we talk about speculative demand for money, so when individual is holding money, writing for bond price to fall, waiting for bond price to fall and yield interest to rise, then we see a speculative demand for money. There is an inverse relation between interest rate and speculative demand. So interest rate is have an inverse relation to speculative demand for money. Neo-Keynesian theory quantify Keynesian liquidity preference as, so let's move to liquidity preference. L is equals to Ky minus Hi. Here K is the sensitivity of money demand. H is the interest sensitivity to money demand. Also K and H both are greater than 0. Then this can be also written as 1 upon H Ky minus L. And since there is an inverse relation between money demand and interest rate, so this will be downward sloping. Money supply in the model is assumed to be exogenous and perfectly inelastic with respect to interest rate. So money supply, since it is determined by central bank, so it will be vertical and perfectly inelastic with respect to interest rate. Now let's derive LM curve. So this is Y1. And since money supply is exogenous, it will be vertical and perfectly inelastic. So now we have 2 points, E1 and E2, which gives us uh, this is M bar upon P bar. We have money and interest rate on y-axis. This can also be seen in the second panel. So from this, we get our LM curve, which is upward sloping. This is point E1, this is E2 with interest I1 and I2 and output Y1 and Y2. If Y increases, then money demand also increases. So by K delta Y, at original interest rate, there is excess demand for money. At this one, I1, we have excess demand for money. This will imply excess supply of bond, so price of bond falls and interest rate rises. Since interest rate rises, PB will fall because of inverse relation, and there is speculative demand for money also falls. Now, algebraically, L is equals to money supply upon price, which means real money supply. Ky minus hi is equals to m bar upon p bar. Hi is equals to ky minus m bar upon p bar. I is equals to 1 upon h, and we have ky minus money supply. This is equation of LM curve. And we can derive slope of LM curve as k upon h, and we will do the next part in the next video. I hope the production is better. Thanks.